What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Frenzy podcast. My name is Ben Peddler. I'm your host. I'm here, as always, with my very special co-hosts, Robert Armstrong and Tyler Mastromarino. Boys, week 7, how we doing?
Biggest Rams fan you've ever met right now.
Biggest Bears fan just because I bet them.
Okay, today's not the betting night. We can get into that later. Super excited for this show. As always, we are with all of our shows, but especially our Monday shows, our reviews from the week, and a lot of players that we want to talk about. Really excited tonight to have Ian here again from Titletown Takes. Had him on a couple weeks ago, and we're itching to get him back on again. Ian, how's it going? Beach? We're going to go with Beach. Beach, how's it going?
Hey, that works for me, man. Thanks for having me back on, fellas. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like a lot's changed since last time we had you on the show, and we'll dive into a lot of that tonight. But we're gonna go ahead and kick off our Monday show as we always do with studs versus duds. Just as a reminder, how this will work is I have 3 players plus a tiebreaker player if needed. You'll each have a turn going first, saying whether you think they'll be a stud or a dud the rest of the season. These players are someone who's been fairly quiet so far in the season, but had a big week this week. So you'll get 1 point. If you go first, you get 1 point for a fact or a piece of backup that you give me for why they're a stud or a dud. Second player will get 1 point for 1 point for a repeat fact, 2 points for a new fact. And then the third player, obviously, 1 for repeat, 3 for new fact. So Beach, again, as a guest, you'll get to go first. So this first player, his offense, kind of new to the scene, being considered a strong offense. Quarterback start of the year. Definitely, making an MVP campaign, has kind of quieted down since then. Definitely not the first receiving option on this team. But it's going to be Cole Beasley. I know he didn't have a touchdown this week, but he did have 11 receptions and 112 yards. Did have 4 receptions and 45 yards for a touchdown last week. He had 11 receptions to Diggs, 6 receptions this week. So, Beach, Cole Beasley, the rest of the season, stud or dud?
Yeah. Wow, give me a tough one to start off. I'm gonna go with dud just because of the fact that, as you mentioned, there's a couple of other offensive weapons, and Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, and John Brown there as well. Beasley seems to be that check down guy late, when Allen seems to be rolling out of the pocket looking for something late as the play kind of starts to expire. We mentioned he had 11 catches on 12 targets for 112 yards. And that was in a game that the Bills didn't find the end zone against the abysmal Jets team. Ultimately, I think that he's too far down on the offensive depth chart for the Bills as far as wide receiver options go. So I'm going to go with dud for Cole Beasley in the Buffalo Bills offense.
All right, yeah, for sure. Again, I'll share my input at the end, but Rob, I'll go to you next here. Cole Beasley, stud or dud the rest of the season?
I think it's a pretty easy dud for fantasy. He's just not a guy that finds the end zone a lot. Only 2 touchdowns on the year. Yeah, he's got the targets to kind of back it up. He reminds me a lot of like an Edelman type player. When the Patriots had a much better offense and Edelman was more of a second option. He gets a lot of targets, a lot of short downs, a lot of just check downs, and get the quarterback out of a tough situation, which is always good to have. So I think he's a stud as a real player, and it's someone I thought the Patriots are going to go after last season when the Bills locked up their wide receiver position. But in fantasy, he's 100% a dud, just doesn't find the end zone. And honestly, if you want, a lot of times now in this podcast, Tyler and I specifically have really been talking about what does the playoff matchups look like now, because this is really the time you're going to start thinking about fantasy playoffs. In the fantasy playoffs, he has to play the 49ers, the Steelers, the Broncos, and the Patriots. So that is 4 of the better defenses in the NFL. Even if the Patriots didn't look like it this week, still 4 of the better passing defenses in the NFL. So not someone I'd pick up on my team to even stash for playoffs. So someone I'm staying away from and is 100% a dud to me.
I was going to say, Rob, the only reason why he may have a chance of sparking off would be depending on which Patriots defense you mentioned shows up in that matchup.
Valid.
Very good point. Very good point, Beach. Tyler, I'll go ahead and go to you. Obviously, same thing. Cole Beasley, stud or dud the rest of the season.
I'm kind of going to go a different direction. I'm going to go with stud just based on the value. He's just under 42% rostered, so that's basically a free agent in most every single league. And he's not going to be a stud to the point where he's a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. He's going to be more of a 3/4 that you kind of sneak in there and some plus matchups. And yeah, he's got Diggs and Brown ahead of him mainly. Brown's already had some injury problems this year. Those could pop up again. Diggs has had plenty of injury problems in his past. We could see some Cole Beasley games where he gets way more involved. And he does play Seattle in 2 weeks. So if he does absolutely boom there, that doesn't mean he's guaranteed for a stud. And Rob had mentioned the strength of schedule is terrible in the playoffs for him. So he's a guy that you're looking to get you into the playoffs, not as much win you a playoff game. But last game was really his big game where this was the first game he had more than 10 catches. Besides that, he's only had 6 catches twice. So not a crazy amount of volume. The Bills don't look as good as they used to. Or I should say earlier in the season, they've kind of been falling behind even in games against like Tennessee and KC. Like this last game, he played the Jets. They're obviously going to win that game. And anybody can do whatever they want against the Jets. So I'm not overreacting to the point where he's a stud. But just based on the value, I think he is going to finish as a wide receiver 3. And if you're picking him up now, that's higher than anticipated. So I'm going to go stud.
Okay. I think you guys all made really good points. I don't really need to reiterate anything. I had him as a stud as well, kind of like Tyler said, just for the value. I think, obviously Josh Allen's Josh Allen. He's obviously had a fantastic season thus far. Not quiet, but has kind of slowed down as of late. But I think he can support 2 solid wide receivers. So, Beach, I'm going to roll you to the back of the list, and Rob, you're going to go ahead and go first. This next player we've already talked about on Studs and Duds. He actually might have even been last week. I think you all had him as a dud, or I think you two had him as a dud, and I had him as a stud, if I remember correctly, but I added him again this week because he had another good week, and I want to see if either of you changes your mind. So last week I asked you, he had 14 touches for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns. This week he had another 9 carries for 27 yards and a touchdown. You both had him as a dud. It's DeAndre Swift. So Rob, you're going to go first. Stud or dud the rest of the season?
I knew where you were going right from the start there. But so he's one I actually last week talked about him as a dud and then had to start him in one of my leagues because of all the running back issues that we kind of had over the past couple weeks. So I'm happy that he actually had a good week. What's changed for me is that I didn't know how this was going to work with him and AP, and that the Lions' offense isn't prolific in the sense that it can really support 2 top-tier running backs. And I didn't know how the splits were going to work because even though his really good week, he popped off, but he had 14 attempts, and then to AP's 15 attempts. Obviously, where Swift's value comes in is the receiving. I think they were saying it this week. I was watching the game. I think he's the second top receiver on the Lions, so he has like the second most catches on the season for any Lions player, which is surprising, especially given that they do have a couple of wide receiver talents. So I think I do have to change my mind and say stud in terms of the fact, similar to what you guys were saying with Cole Beasley, the value that you're getting with him right now is the running back position is very injured, especially this week. We picked up even a couple more injuries. I know like Aaron Jones came out last second, you had Joe Mixon, and then Chris Carson got injured this week as well. So you're already looking to find these depth running backs, and I think he does have a ton of value there, and not someone now, if I'm forced to start him, I'm not going to be afraid that he's just going to put up a total dud of a game. I think he's just going to be a consistent scorer now because he's going to get the catches. He's going to get enough attempts running to make up for it. And if he finds the end zone, then he's had a really good week. So I have to say stud there.
Being the only person that took him as a stud last week, I will agree with you. Tyler, we'll move on to you here. DeAndre Swift, again, everything I just said. Stud or dud the rest of the season?
I am going to go with a dud still.
Oh my gosh, how I
I
can't get you to
know.
buy in. All right,
Are
go
you are you
ahead.
that
No,
high? Are you that high up on Adrian Peterson? Is that what it is? Like, are
no,
you
no,
all
not
Well,
in
at
on
all.
let's
the
let him
ageless
talk.
wonder?
Let's let him talk and see what he has
Not
to
at all.
say.
So these two big games, they're against Jacksonville and Atlanta. Those are some of the worst defenses in the league. I don't care if they're bad running defense, bad passing defenses, they're bad at everything. These are games that should have been positive game flow for the Lions. If any games are going to be positive game flow, they should have been running the ball. And Swift only had 9 touches on the ground to Adrian Peterson's 11. The passing game does get me a little more excited because he still had 4 catches, but he's not that involved in the passing game, to be honest. He's had 1 game with 5 catches, 2 games with 4. Then they're all kind of scattered out. So he hasn't really had one of those games that you're looking for in PPR where he gets like 6 or 7 catches to really save his fantasy value. The only reason I think we're going crazy is because he had 2 touchdowns last week, and that was only on 14 carries. So to me, the volume still isn't there. He's definitely a sell high target for me if people are looking for him. I think this upcoming week he's going to play Indy, so this is going to be the real test. If he pops off here, sure, you guys can all tell me what an idiot I am, but I don't think it's going to happen. He's got a couple decent matchups here and there, but for the most part, he's still going to be a dud. He still should be right on your bench or your flex spot at best.
I don't agree with you. Well,
I know.
flex spot. Okay, I mean maybe that's a discussion we could have, but obviously we'll agree to disagree here. But Beach, I don't want to take away from your thunder. So DeAndre Swift stud or dud the rest of the season.
I'm gonna agree with Rob. I think he's definitely got stud potential here. Rob already mentioned that he's behind AP, and AP is going to get a large majority of the touches out of the backfield as far as running the ball is concerned. But I think that he's the much better receiving option out of the backfield as opposed to Peterson. He had 4 catches for 21 yards. And Tyler already mentioned it. Next week they have a tough matchup against Indy, who they're only allowing 88.3 yards on the ground per game so far this season. So it might be a little bit of a tougher day to run the ball. So there's definitely going to be a little bit more chance for him to maybe pick up a few extra catches out of the backfield. But then looking ahead, they got Minnesota's twice on the schedule. They got to play the Redskins, Carolina, Houston. So there's still some games here that definitely could help sell that stud stock in DeAndre Swift.
Okay. Obviously, I agree with you mostly there. I have him as a stud as well. I just think, AP is only going to go for so long, and, the opportunity is there for him for sure. So I think it's his to take over. Last guy here, we've not talked about, I think maybe we talked about him like a few weeks ago, maybe like 4 or 5 weeks ago. But he has touchdowns in his last 3 games. The guy we definitely talked about was just non-existent in this game for the most part. This week he had 5 receptions, 107 yards, and a touchdown. It's Nelson Aguilar. I'm totally drawing a blank on who goes first on this one. I think it's Rob.
No, I think it's me.
Okay, I'm sorry. Forgive me, boys. All right, Tyler, you're going to go first here, obviously. So Nelson Aguilar, stud or dud the rest of the season?
I mean, based on the fact that he's under 2% rostered, he's a stud for a free agent pickup, I think, and he's going to be kind of more of a stash. I'm kind of shocked you're talking about this player because I have him as a waiver wire pickup, but to me, he's emerging himself as the number 1 wide receiver, and that's wide receiver, not pass catcher. They still have Darren Waller there, who's going to get all the targets. But Aguilar's slowly seeing his targets go up, and now he doesn't drop every single thing that comes his way. He did have 1 or 2 drops that game that I saw that still made me laugh, but he's looked great so far. He said the touchdown you mentioned in his last 3 games, this is really his first big game where he reached over 100 yards. But that offense has been taking a lot of deep shots lately, and Henry Ruggs has been non-existent. He's only played 4 games this season, and he's had 3 catches as his most catches that he's had in a single game. I'm actually really excited for Nelson Aguilar rest of the season. The Raiders have been looking like a much better team lately. And I'll go with stud. I mean, he's not going to reach my lineup just yet, but I'll take him as a stud at 2% rostered.
No, I think that's fair. It's just kind of crazy we're talking about him in this capacity because obviously a couple years ago, there was, he came into the league and then there was just nothing from there, and now he's kind of, getting that production out there. I also wanted to share the scores. I usually share the scores after the second player. So before that round, I had Beach at 13, Rob at 11, and Tyler at 12. So Tyler, you're going to end your turn there with 16, which is a good score we've seen.
Okay.
Beach, we're going to go with you next here. Nelson Aguilar, stud or dud the rest of the season?
I'm ultimately going to go with a dud here. This is a Raiders offense that can be very hit or miss. Looking at the depth chart, obviously, we already mentioned, Darren Waller's going to get a lot of the targets as far as pass attempts go from Derek Carr. But the other wide receiver options as well include Henry Ruggs and Hunter Renfrow. He had 5 catches on 9 targets and a TD in a game that they just got absolutely blown out in. Looking ahead to their schedule, it's one of those where it really depends on what Raider team that we've seen here in the first couple of weeks comes to play. They got to go to Cleveland this coming weekend. That'll be a bit of a tougher matchup against the Cleveland defense that, again, can be hit or miss. I'm going to keep him as a dud just because I think there's a little bit better offensive weapons for the Raiders to utilize ahead of him. He's a veteran guy, so he can kind of, lead by example and be a guy that, Carr can kind of lean to when he needs an absolute go-to catch, maybe later in the game to try to keep a drive alive. But I'm not all that confident in Aguilar's ability to do anything consistent over the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's certainly understandable considering what we've seen and, what we know we can get out of him. So definitely something to monitor. Rob, we'll have you wrap it up here. Big grind for the win if you could pull it off. Nelson Aguilar, stud or dud the rest of the season?
I have to go with stud, strictly on the basis that when Tyler said 1.8% rostered, I was looking at that, and then I was trying to do the math in my head. You have most leagues about 10 to 12 teams. You think 2 wide receivers and maybe a flex. If not, you're going to at least have 2 on your bench. So now you're looking at 40 plus to 48, depending on a 12-man league. He's position ranked 32. So already considering the fact that he's only rostered in less than 2% of leagues, and the fact that if you do the math out, he should be rostered in every single league that's at least 10 teams and higher, even in an eight-man league like ours, I would even say. If you do the math out, most people would have at least 3 wide receivers on their bench, and that would then, in turn, make him need to be rostered. The one thing you brought up when you were introducing the player is someone who's kind of memed for the drops that he had in Philadelphia. Even his bad weeks, one target, 1 catch, 3 targets, 2 catches, 4 targets, 4 catches, 2 targets, 2 catches. And then last week was 9 targets, 5 catches. Again, you can't say necessarily the targets because the targets, if as long as it's thrown at their feet, it's technically their target. So for me, what's turned him from the dud to the stud is the fact that when he's getting the opportunities to make these plays, he's actually catching them. Like you said, 3 touchdowns the last 3 weeks. It just seems that even though there is a lot of options, I personally like Hunter Renfrow better. The way the Raiders play, it seems that Hunter Renfrow is used when they need to do something late in games to make a play. And that's about it. You see in the Patriots game, like we saw, obviously because we all watched the game, he did nothing. Hunter Renfrow did nothing all game, and then all of a sudden was using the late game to get the late touchdown. And that's what Hunter Renfrow's been done all season. So you have Henry Ruggs, the deep threat. He's just fast, and Nelson Aguilar really is that. I think they're true, at least the way they look at it, number 2. And I think having Darren Waller actually back healthy has helped Aguilar. I think he struggled in the weeks that Waller was out. So I'm going to go with stud, especially just as we get more of this place with injuries, and he really needs to be rostered in way more than 2% of leagues.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a stud. I have him at a stud as well. Again, kind of like Cole Beasley, just kind of because of opportunity and the way Hunter Renfrow is not playing. The way Hunter Renfrow is playing, but it's not good. So as this is a fantasy football show, Rob's really the only one that kind of brought it back to fantasy in benches and lineups. So That was a big one there. So Rob's going to take the win on this one.
Oh, you'll love to see a comeback story like I need to do in real fantasy.
That was a dream comeback story. Impressive analysis. So we're going to give you the win on that one. Congratulations. We'll see if next week's guest can knock you off the pedestal. But that will wrap up Studs and Duds for this week. Didn't need to dig into our overtime player. Maybe we can save him for next week if he performs well again. But we'll move into the next portion of the show now. We'll go into our game reviews from this past week. Obviously, a lot of surprises, some not so many surprises. Devastation for our hometown team. We'll get that. We'll talk about that when we get there. First game I want to talk about is the Giants at the Eagles. Eagles take this one 22-21 at home. Talk about the Giants first. Daniel Jones, 187 yards and 2 touchdowns. Sterling Shepard, kind of resuming his season here, had 6 receptions, 59 yards, and a touchdown. Golden Tate also had a touchdown. For the Eagles, Carson Wentz, 359 yards and 2 touchdowns, also added a rushing touchdown on the day. Boston Scott looked good, 12 rushes for 46 yards and had the receiving touchdown. But Travis Fulgham, Tyler, I'm going here first because you've been tooting his horn for 3 weeks. Very quiet game. So what do you expect out of him? Still no Alshon Jeffrey. So what does this offense kind of look like moving forward?
I'm still excited about Travis Fulgham. He still got an end zone target that he kind of dropped out of the back of the end zone. He might have been out of bounds if he had caught it anyways. I was hoping for a little bit better game against the Giants, but next week they get Dallas, and I'm absolutely firing him up against Dallas. I mean, how can you not fire up anybody? But he still had 11 targets that game, so that's 3 straight games he's had 10 targets. There's no concerns for me now. I mean, Deshaun Jackson took away some of the targets. Unfortunately, he came back and got injured from a pretty bad-looking play, so he's going to be out probably on IR again, and then they're talking about trading Alshon Jeffrey again, so I think his stock's even higher than it was after the bad game. And then Boston Scott, kind of like we expected, he got some work receiving, and he scored the game-winning touchdown on a receiving touchdown. So he's very serviceable without Miles Sanders in the lineup.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you picked him up for me, so I couldn't steal him. Not that I would have started him anyway, but I'm ready for Miles Sanders to come back sooner rather than later. I think we learned or we kind of knew this already, that Boston Scott was the better receiving running back. Obviously had the receiving touchdown this week, so definitely monitor Sanders' progress moving forward. Really quick beach on the Giants. Obviously Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate with the touchdowns. Not really much going on the ground game. Devonta Freeman hasn't really had his breakout yet. So what are you expecting out of these guys moving forward?
Not much. I expect them to continue to stay in the dogfight with the other team that calls MetLife Stadium their home, the New York Jets. I think it's going to come down to those two as far as who's getting the number 1 overall pick. When you were running through the numbers, you left out the most interesting one, that Daniel Jones was sniped out of the last row of the stadium on that lengthy run. The Giants, I mean, they show a little bit of promise. I think that this would be a much better offense. It would be a little bit more consistency if they had, their number 1 back in Saquon Barkley back there. But unfortunately, without that, their running game has severely struggled. And with that, it kind of leaves Daniel Jones in the situation where he kind of has to take over that dual quarterback, running and throwing weapon that, a lot of people maybe thought he was going to be. I don't think they expected it to come in this kind of fashion without Saquon out there in the backfield as well.
Yeah, I think there's a few guys in the league that kind of have that burden on their shoulders, whether they actually need to or not. Kyler Murray comes to mind as someone who might not necessarily need to, but it's just such a big part of his game. And then, Cam Newton, who maybe does have that burden on his shoulders, just given the running backs in New England. So we'll definitely monitor that moving forward. Next game I want to talk about is the Panthers at the Saints. Panthers go to the Dome, lose this one to the Saints, 27-24. Teddy Bridgewater, 254 yards and 2 touchdowns. DJ Moore had a big day, caught both of those touchdowns, 4 receptions on 93 yards for the 2 touchdowns. Mike Davis finally came back down to earth this week, only 7 receptions for 12 yards. Curtis Samuel did have the rushing touchdown. Rob, talk to me about this offense. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey's expected back any week now. So Mike Davis's value always obviously, goes away. This may have been the last big week to get anything out of him. What do you expect out of these guys moving forward? And then how does CMC returning affect that?
Yeah, so obviously the latest news was a couple hours ago that he practiced today, but it seems like a situation where the team really doesn't want him to play until he's fully healthy, and he's just like he's a baller. He wants to play, obviously, so he's fighting to come back this week. So very much monitor that. If you have Mike Davis, he's an instant start if he's out, and then he's an instant sit if he's in, sort of situation. So. Even though you said Mike Davis quite weak, he still had the 5 receptions, which is always really nice when you get at your running back, especially in a game when they, the team ran the ball for 37 yards as a whole with a quarterback that can run as well. So anytime you get those kind of receptions is always good. But yeah, no, Tyler's guy Robbie Anderson still had 74 yards on 6 catches. So even though he doesn't find the end zone, DJ Moore gets both touchdowns. The ones that we're receiving at least, it's still a good offense. They clearly can support. Multiple receivers, even Curtis Samuel having 6 catches for 48 yards, and then Robbie Anderson 6 catches, DJ Moore 4 catches for 93 yards, and then Curtis Samuel ran one in. So, there's 3 wide receivers on this team that you can realistically have on your roster right now, and especially given their schedule coming up with the Falcons, and even the Chiefs' defense isn't great. Bucks is good, but you get the Falcons next week, and I think to see another week like this, they're probably going to multiple touchdowns. They're way better. This is a way better team than I thought it would be, essentially. Even though they're only 3-4, record doesn't show it too much. Tough schedule so far, and I think it's a team that's way better than we had thought coming in, and a lot of fantasy potential.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're spot on there.
And that's with CMC gone. So. Yeah,
no kidding. And then he's gonna obviously be coming back soon. So, you got to assume that's only going up from there. For the Saints, Drew Brees, 287 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jared Cook had his standard 3 receptions for 30 yards and a touchdown. Alvin Kamara, good volume, 14 carries, 83 yards, no touchdown. Kind of a more down-to-earth game for him as well. Not much more we need to talk about there. Next game I want to dig into is the Bills at the Jets. Tyler Bass takes this one on the road, 18-10, 6 field goals on the day. I feel like there's always a kicker that has 6 field goals. Brandon McManus did not repeat that effort this week. But Kyle Allen, 357.
He missed 2 as well, which is absurd.
Sorry, say it again.
Oh, I was just saying that Tyler Bass missed 2 field goals as well, which is insane. He had 8 attempts this game.
Yeah, he made 6.
Imagine a kicker with 8 field goals. Imagine.
Yeah, I know. That probably would have broken a record.
Josh Allen.
No, yeah, I was going to say Josh Allen, 357 yards, no touchdowns or interceptions. Obviously, like I said, Tyler Bass just scored all 18 points for this game. Cole Beasley, I know we kind of already talked about him. 2 touchdowns for him. Sanjay P. Ryan had the touchdown. Ian, talk to me about this a little bit. Obviously, we've kind of been low on the Jets all year, and, the Bills, I kind of said how Josh Allen's been kind of not declining, but just quieter than he started off the season. What do you see for them? I mean, you're a Singletary owner. Obviously, he's not been, what you were hoping for. So how do you see this offense moving forward?
I think it all rests on the shoulders of Josh Allen. I mean, 30 of 43 for 307 yards. Didn't throw a touchdown. Obviously, since the Bills didn't find the end zone at all. And again, this is against a struggling New York Jets team that's 0-7 now on the season as a whole. And we kind of already talked about it. It's going to be interesting to see what Bills team shows up this week and how Belichick and the rest of his defensive staff game plan for this. They usually have a good idea of how to control mobile quarterbacks. I mean, we saw what they did against Kansas City a couple of weeks ago. and how they were kind of able to keep Mahomes in check and really limit his ability to get out of the pocket and extend plays and kind of do what he does best. I think that if Belichick can kind of come up with something similar to the game plan that they had for Kansas City, it could be a long day for the Bills offense, especially since this running game really can, it's inconsistent right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair analysis. And it's kind of, that's the same drum we've been beating to all year so far. So I don't really think there's any further need to dig into that. Next game we'll dive into is the Browns at the Bengals. Browns take this one on the road, 37-34. Baker Mayfield, 297 yards and 5 touchdowns, looked a lot better than he did last week. Harrison Bryant, if you've ever heard of him, 4 receptions, 56 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kareem Hunt and David...
Backup tight end.
Say it again?
I said backup tight end. I had Austin Hooper in one of my leagues until the second he went out, last second.
Love the backup tight end. And then Kareem Hunt and David Njoku grabbed a couple through the air as well. For the Bengals, Joey Burrow continuing his great rookie campaign, 406 yards and 3 touchdowns to Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and Giovanni Bernard. Tyler, talk to me about this offense. Obviously, you're a Mixon owner. He doesn't play this week, so Bernard's, ideally a RB2 going into this week. Probably put up those numbers, I would say, equals about his production. But Joe Burrow is just looking great. Aside from that 1 week, he dipped under 200 yards. Other than that, he's been over 300 yards, over 400 this week. I mean, despite the loss, this offense is exciting looking forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Joe Burrow has emerged as a great fantasy option. It's even boosted by how bad the Bengals defense is. He's definitely a guy you could look at as a top 10 QB without real hesitation, to be honest, because he's putting up a ton of yards. And at this young of a rookie, he's only going to get better as the season goes on, I think. So I'm even looking to start him some more. He loves to try and run it in the red zone as well. He likes going for those short yardage plays, so he even had a rushing touchdown this game, which is perfect. That's our fantasy QB. That's what we're looking for. And Giovanni Bernard, he stepped right in where Joe Mixon kind of left off. He wasn't super effective on the ground, only 13 rushes for 70 yards, but he picked up in the passing game and he got a touchdown. So that's what we're looking for. And Tyler Boyd was just everywhere on the field. He had 11 catches, 100 yards, touchdown, everything you hope for out of Tyler Boyd. And even AJ Green got involved. 7 catches for 82 yards. He probably got dropped in most leagues, but he's startable in PPR only, I think. There aren't going to be a ton of plus matchups for the Bengals. Tyler Boyd's still the guy that I would want over AJ Green, though.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I completely agree with you. Rob, real quick here on the Browns. Obviously, bounce-back game for Baker, 5 touchdowns. Odell Beckham Jr. gets injured, leaves the game. We find out earlier today, torn ACL, and he'll be done for the season. You mentioned the backup tight end. Obviously, you got to think Jarvis Landry, his fantasy value takes a good jump in this. I mean, obviously, Odell's health is primary, but this is a fantasy football show, so as far as looking at backups and who else on this offense we can kind of plug into his place and who will get some of his volume, what does that look like for you moving forward?
It's interesting. So I can't find it now, but I saw it on Twitter earlier today. But Baker actually averages more fantasy points when Odell's not healthy or not in the lineup for any reason. So since they've been together in Cleveland, when Odell's not in the lineup, Baker's basically been a better quarterback. So it kind of showed here. I mean, Odell went down real early. Baker comes out with 5 touchdowns. So what do you expect? I don't know. You're going to get Austin Hooper back. I think that was a freak sort of last-minute injury that was really going to keep him out for the week, hopefully. Hopefully he's back. So, Harrison Bryant maybe isn't a starter every week. But I would have expected this game to be a game that Jarvis Landry got a little bit more involved in. Obviously, it's one of his better weeks, unfortunately, on the season. But yeah, no, until I get another week or two without Odell, I want to see kind of how they settle. Again, it is the Bengals. Tyler just mentioned how bad they were. I don't want to take too much out of it. It's the Baker cycle where he gets bad, gets roasted, and then has a huge game. And then people start turn around and then he has a bad game again. So I want to give it a few like a week or two to really understand who's going to be the next man up mentality there, because I imagine Jarvis Landry should be it, but he hasn't shown any light of it this year. So if anything, Kareem Hunt just gets boosted because he's a lot of weight on his shoulders, both in the pass game and still the run game with Chubb out.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think that's fair, especially with on being unsure when Chubb's gonna come back. Kareem Hunt's still top 10, maybe even top 7 running back until further notice. Next game I want to talk about is the Cowboys at the Washington football team. Dallas Cowboys,
Yikes.
Obviously tough game for them. Most importantly, Andy Dalton takes a terrible hit. Disgusting to see. He's in concussion protocol. Threw for 75 yards before that. Zeke, 12 carries for 45 yards. Just nothing was working for the Cowboys on this. For the football team, Kyle Allen, 194 yards and 2 touchdowns. Terry McLaurin had a really good day, 7 receptions, 90 yards and a touchdown. Logan Thomas had a touchdown as well. Beach, talk to me about the Cowboys here. Obviously, there's a lot of worry, or there was a lot of worry when Dak went out. Now Andy Dalton could be out for a week. Zeke's not performing. The wide receivers, we've all knocked way down our rankings. What are you even doing with this offense moving forward?
Finding a quarterback would be my number one option. And when I say finding a quarterback, I mean getting one and maybe putting him in bubble wrap for the rest of the season, because I feel like there's a QB curse in Dallas right now. I mean, you lose Dak 2 weeks ago, and now, who knows how long Andy Dalton's going to be out. And now you got the rookie DiNucci in there coming out of JMU. Obviously, the Cowboys liked what they saw out of him, but I mean, how many games can you honestly expect to win with a kid that played FCS college ball? And as you mentioned, the running game isn't really doing much. Zeke has probably been as inconsistent this year as he's been in his whole career. It's going to be a little concerning for fantasy owners.
It's a Steven Ben's running back life.
I was gonna say it's definitely concerning as a fantasy owner. I mean, I think I've made the decision now. I'm not going to give up on him. I'll go down with the ship if that's what needs to happen. But I mean, if anything, he's he'll be the best flex that anyone's ever seen.
I mean, getting back to, you got to go down with the ship. I mean, it's Ezekiel Elliott. At the end of the day, I mean, right now the Cowboys offense really doesn't have much going for him. And if this kid DiNucci is going to come in and he starts to struggle throwing the ball, what are they going to do? They're going to have to run the ball. And you're going to feed it to the guy that, he's your franchise running back right now. I mean, at some point you're going to think that he's going to turn around. So, I mean, that's a good ship to be holding on for dear life with.
Yeah, I think for Zeke, I'm going to take Tyler's advice from last week. I think he just needs to get a meaner tattoo than the feed me tattoo. That just seems to be the only fix for him. Anyways, yeah, so we'll hope that the Cowboys can figure it out moving forward. Next game I want to dive into is the Packers at the Texans. Packers take this one on the road, 35-20. Aaron Rodgers, strong showing, 283 yards and 4 touchdowns. Maybe the bigger note in this game, though, Devontae Adams with a monster game, especially in PPR. 13 receptions, 196 yards and 2 touchdowns. For this offense, no Aaron Jones this week. And then for the Texans, Deshaun Watson, 309 yards and 2 touchdowns to David Johnson and Will Fuller. Texans kind of still back to their struggling. I mean, the Packers are obviously playing very well this year. Aaron Rodgers is having arguably an MVP caliber campaign this year. Rob, talk to me about the Packers really quick. I know you're kind of a Aaron Rodgers guy. Devontae Adams, monster week, kind of not surprising, but I mean, those numbers are just unreal. No Aaron Jones, like I said. So moving forward, what do you see for these guys?
Yeah, it was interesting to see Jamal Williams kind of come in and play exactly how Aaron Jones would have played. Really, those stats right there. We've seen Aaron Jones expand his role out of the backfield, catching the ball. Jamal Williams had 4 catches, and then obviously had the 19 carries, 77 yards, and a touchdown. So honestly, who's ever the starting running back there it is a good to go at this point. System running back, we'll call it, I guess. But you kind of knew Aaron Rodgers wasn't going to struggle 2 weeks in a row. He never has really in his career like that. I mean, there was career highs. He thrown pick 6 for like the first time in a while, first time with like multiple interceptions in a while. So we knew it wasn't going to be as bad. I did not realize it was going to be that good. I mean, we know the Texans isn't a very good team, but just kind of Devonta Adams. He's a stud. I mean, like he was a first round pick, second round. Tyler, I think you picked.
I got
in
him in
league,
the
so,
second,
like,
but an 8-man. So.
Yeah, but like one of the first wide receivers picked, I should say, I guess. So he's like top 3 wide receiver picked anyway, so you kind of knew what you're going to get with him, and now he's paid off now that he's fully healthy. And as long as he stays healthy, I mean, this offense is insane between the two of them. I mean, actually looking at it, no one else really did anything. I mean, I know like Jay Sternberger had 1 catch for a touchdown, and Malik Taylor had 2 catches for 1 touchdown. So the touchdowns are spread out, but I mean, in terms of catches and yards, no one else had more than 4 catches and 37 yards, and that was Jamal Williams was second. So I still like Robert Tonyan. I know Tyler's had him as descender a couple weeks in a row, but I think there's just enough. Aaron Rodgers is too good to, you're gonna have to have at least 1 tight end and 1 wide receiver really be solid in that offense.
No, yeah, I think that's fair analysis, and I think this game may have been even worse if Aaron Jones did play. For the Texans, Tyler, obviously their struggles kind of continue. Deshaun Watson did have a strong day, but just couldn't pull out the win at home. What do you think out of these guys moving forward? There were rumors of trading David Johnson, even though that wouldn't make any sense because they just got rid of DeAndre Hopkins for him. But what do you think is the direction these guys take moving forward?
So first off, Aaron Jones's yardage line for the player prop was at like 86 yards, and he totally would have hit that if he had played in that game, all right? Would have hit that, so we're going to assume that I'm still good at player props and ignore the DK Metcalf for later. But this Texans offense, it's exactly what you expect out of it. They go down early in games. They get a lot of garbage time points. Deshaun Watson over 300 yards. That's going to happen a lot. They're a very good offense and a not-so-great defense, so there's going to be tons of yards to go around for the wide receivers, and Cobb finally emerged this game over Cooks and Fuller. I mean, Cobb's still not going to be the main guy to me. It's definitely Cooks and Fuller over him, but showed that you can kind of maybe look his way in free agency if you're desperate for wide receivers and if you're in a deeper league. And no real concerns with David Johnson. I mean, he's still got just under 20 touches and finding the end zone a lot with this offense, so it's a good fit for him, I think. And I'm fine with owning people in this offense. I still feel good about it because the Texans suck, but their offense is good.
No, I agree, and I think that's fair analysis. Now we'll dive into the Lions at the Falcons. Lions take this one on the road, 23-22. We can go ahead and laugh about the Todd Gurley touchdown when we get there.
Fantasy hero, dude.
I mean, yeah, fantasy managers love it. I mean, that was real. That was a tough watch. That was just tough to watch.
That's the same way Penn State cost me on Saturday night.
Oh, really?
Gurley scoring that touchdown late in the fourth quarter. That's the same way Penn State ended up losing to Indiana on Saturday night.
Yeah, it's
not
brutal.
good.
A tough, really tough watch. Like I
right
said,
now the reason I'm losing. So my matchup, if he fell down a yard short, I'd be winning right now.
Interesting. Matt Ryan, 338 yards and a touchdown. That went to Calvin Ridley, who had 5 receptions for 69 yards on that touchdown. Julio, another productive day, 8 receptions for 97 yards. Gurley, 2 touchdowns on the ground. Obviously, we talked about that one that he tried to tiptoe along, but it just kind of fell over the goal line. For the Lions, Matthew Stafford, 340 yards and a touchdown at the end of the game. That went to T.J. Hawkinson, then ultimately... and then DeAndre Swift had, we've kind of already talked about him. But, Rob, for the Lions moving forward, I know, again, like I said, we already talked about DeAndre Swift. But with T.J. Hawkinson and Kenny Golladay, what do you kind of see out of these guys moving forward? I mean, there was no touchdowns until the end of the game. So how do you see this developing moving forward?
Even without the touchdown, I mean, we talked about this. I like to talk about this with tight ends a lot, especially once you get past like your front three this year, which isn't actually including Zach Ertz right now. It's
I know.
the Travis Kelce, George Kittle, and Darren Waller are your top three. So outside you get them, you really just want that 5 catch range, 50 to 60 yards. And if you get a touchdown, you now are very happy you had a very good tight end week. If you don't get the touchdown,
Yeah.
you know what? You're like, you have 10.9 points is not bad for a tight end outside those top three guys. So, even without that touchdown, Matthew Stafford slings the ball. He's a gunslinger. He's, I think, the most underrated quarterback right now in the league. I at least during his whole career, because he's been stuck on this Lions team that's just been horrific his whole time there. So, Kenny Golladay gets a ton of points because he has 114 yards and 6 catches, and Hawkinson had 10.9 points before that touchdown. You take away the catch and the reception or the yards, but like without that touchdown catch, like it's still good. You take away 6 points, it's still a good tight end week. So I think he now becomes just like a really good option because Matthew Stafford's looking at him in desperate situations, and then Kenny Golladay continues to be that number one in that offense, and is not going to let that go. So I think all around it's good, and I think even though we already talked about Swift, getting Swift more involved and kind of going younger there and having him both do the rushing and the pass catching opens up way more options, so you don't have to have AP keep coming on and off the field. So I think this is just improving the offense. I mean, they're 3-3, which is a good Lions season so far, and they 2 games go their way, they could be 5-1. So
Yeah.
they've lost a few heartbreakers at the beginning of the season. So yeah, no, I think it's a good offense. Not a very surprising one because Matthew Stafford's always been good fantasy, but more surprising recently with how successful it's been.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think, good for them to pull out a win this week. And like you said, a couple of good bounces their way, and they could be 5-1. Next game we'll talk about, really good game. Steelers at the Titans. Steelers take this one on the road, 27-24. Big Ben, 268 yards and 2 touchdowns. Did have 3 interceptions, but it ultimately didn't matter at the end of the day. Deontay Johnson, big day, 9 receptions, 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. Benny Snell had a touchdown on the ground as well. For the Titans, Ryan Tannehill, 220 yards and 2 touchdowns. Productive week for A.J. Brown again, 6 receptions for 153 yards and a touchdown. Corey Davis grabs a touchdown as well, and then Derrick Henry, 20 touches for 75 yards and a touchdown on the ground later in the game. Beach, talk to me about this offense. I mean, obviously, despite the loss, they have been rolling. 2 undefeated teams going into this week. Obviously, that is no more. The Steelers remain undefeated. But for the Titans, I mean, their offense, like I just said, is rolling. And how do you see that kind of transpiring moving forward? Obviously, Jonnu Smith wasn't really involved. Adam Humphries not quite back yet. So what do you see out of these guys moving forward?
I think that this is just going to be one of those bumps in the road. I mean, this is a Titans team. They're averaging 31.3 points a game. As far as rushing goes, they've got 145 yards per game on the ground. I mean, yesterday wasn't the greatest day, but I think part of that has to do with the Steelers' defense. The Steelers' defense is, they've looked really good here over the course of the first 6 weeks, and that's obviously a testament to them as they're now the only undefeated team left in the league. I'm not all that concerned. I think Mike Vrabel has a system in place there that really fits well, and I think he's kind of sponged some of that stink off of Ryan Tannehill that he had, from his time when he was down in Miami and Adam Gase was the offensive coordinator down there. I mean, we look at Adam Gase now and look what he's doing to Sam Darnold in New York. So I'm not all that concerned. I think you're going to see more out of this Tennessee offense that you've seen the first couple of weeks moving forward. Jonnu Smith has been an absolute monster when Ryan Tannehill needs a big catch late in the game. And, Derrick Henry, he underperformed yesterday, but, I'm not all that concerned for fantasy owners.
No, that's fair, and I agree. I would say, this is obviously going to be one of the better games of the week. could have been a toss-up as to who won. But Tyler, really quick on the Steelers. I know we've kind of talked about the wide receivers a lot. For me, Juju, has regressed a lot, whether, for whatever reason that is. Obviously, Deontay Johnson seems to be the superior option there. Maybe he's kind of like, Deontay's kind of like Calvin
I don't get how you can say that. You said this in the chat. I had to bring this up. I knew it's Tyler's, but they literally had the exact same receptions, but Juju had 5 more yards. I know the touchdowns come in, but you say like as I'm not talking about fantasy. I'm talking about in that offense. I don't know how you could look at that game and say Deontay Johnson's a superior weapon in that.
I wouldn't say superior. I didn't say superior. I just said I think he's the favorite option, and he's kind of like the Calvin Ridley to the Julio Jones, because Juju's going to draw the top coverage, so that leaves Deontay open for the big plays, which obviously transpired this week. Chase Claypool obviously was, non-existent in this game. So Tyler, I was going to kind of ask you about that. How in James Washington as well, how you see these guys rotating around moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. As a Juju Smith-Schuster owner, a good sight for me to see Claypool only have 1 catch for -2 yards. I was kind of waiting for this to happen just because there's no way he's ever going to do that good again repeat that 4-touchdown game. I don't even know how he got that many yards. He just broke a couple big plays and whatnot, but you're going to see his targets just plummet. He's not going to be that involved in the offense. He's going to get a touchdown here and there. Because earlier in the season when I was watching the games, Claypool was mainly a deep ball guy, someone that they would take a shot to here and there. And that's the only way you're going to get fantasy value out of him. So he's going to be a straight boomer bust guy for me, I think. And a great bounce back game for Juju Smith-Schuster. And same with Deontay Johnson. I mean, Deontay Johnson has been in and out of the lineup due to injuries. And good to see them both actually perform. I don't think they've had a good fantasy day together where they both have had 9 catches for 80 yards. Those are solid games for PPR, and Juju's kind of creeping up to the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 area again if he can start finding the end zone. But I'm waiting for Juju to eat up a team that's just bad at defending the slot because he hasn't performed well. And Deontay Johnson, they're looking more to in the red zone where Juju's more of the slot guy. So hopefully he can start to find some more space. Teams will key in on Deontay Johnson. But like Rob had said, I think it's going to be pretty even between those 2 guys for receivers. And I don't think any of the other guys are going to be that involved. Eric Ebron, good for a tight end, 6 catches for 50 yards, but that's not really taking away from the other guys. And then James Conner, 20 rushes for 82 yards. That's just over 4 yards a carry, which is solid for a running back. It's decent, I guess, as far as you can go. He's just missing the touchdown for the fantasy day.
Got it absolutely robbed from him by Benny Snell.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Gilly's got to be pissed.
2 rushes for a touchdown.
Gilly's got to be real shook about that. Next thing we want to talk about is the Buccaneers at the Raiders. Tom Brady had another day. Buccaneers take this one on the road, 46-20. Like I said, Brady, 369 yards and 4 touchdowns. Also had his patent. Say it again.
Nice. 369 yards.
Nice.
Also had his patented 1-yard QB sneak for a touchdown. As you'd expect, all 4 touchdowns went to 4 different receivers: Scotty Miller, Chris Godwin, Gronk, and Johnson.
Some guy named Johnson. Yeah.
It's okay. Tyler Johnson. I think he's a rookie this year.
I think he is, because I think Brady put him in his story last week and said, like, good job, young kid, or something like that. This is like a young kid to watch or something. And now he's gone because AB, but
Yeah. And I think Scotty Miller's position is going to fade away pretty quickly, too. And then Rojo had a rushing touchdown. This game was just so out of reach for the Raiders. Derek Carr, 284 yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, Aguilar had the good week with the touchdown. Darren Waller, touchdown as well. I feel like we don't need to talk about the Buccaneers. I mean, other than the Antonio Brown signing, of course. I'll kind of share my thoughts on this first, and then I'll open it up to you guys. For me, actually, you know what? No, Rob, I want you to go first because I picked him up. And I have Chris Godwin, so I'll go last. Rob, you go first.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's a great offense. There's not too much to say. I think we're all happy that I think we all wanted Gronk as an ascender last week for tight ends. and we were pleased to see that he was targeted in the red zone, and that was what was kind of changed our fortune because he hasn't looked Gronk since the start of the year until last week, and he repeats it exactly in that tight end range I just mentioned with the 5 catches, 62 yards, and then you get a touchdown. It's a great week. So yeah, it's the typical Brady game right there. If he's gonna have a good game, you won't see a person get more than 1 touchdown.
Nope.
Even Rojo, you can even get both rushing touchdowns when Tom Brady has to steal one. So yeah, no, I'm interested to see how AB works. Like you said, it might be Scotty Miller getting the boot, but I think the way Scotty Miller plays, I think he still has a role in that offense because that is a prototypical, Scotty Miller is a prototypical Patriots receiver, which means he's a prototypical Tom Brady receiver. So yeah, I think Godwin's still got a thing. I think the biggest hurt, honestly, of AB is Mike Evans.
Yeah.
Gronk took his red zone targets, which is what Mike Evans was feeding on for fantasy value. And then now AB's going to take his catches not in the red zone. He only had 2 this week, but those 2 could go away. So I don't really know how Mike Evans fits into this offense when AB gets there. If AB comes in as AB and is still him and actually plays more than a week. So
yeah, that's what I was going to say as well. I'll kind of echo what you said. For me, the biggest hurt is Mike Evans as well. Obviously, they both line up on the outside. Godwin more lines up in the slot, so it's not as bad for him. I think everyone obviously has, slight regression. You can kind of blanket that term over all of them just for AB coming into town. But that'll definitely be interesting to watch once he passes the COVID protocol and, works his way into the offense. Next game we'll talk about is the Chiefs at the Broncos here. Chiefs handily take this one on the road, 43-16. Mahomes, fairly quiet day, 200 yards and a touchdown. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a strong day. First rushing touchdown for him, though, since week 1, which was exciting to see. Tyreek Hill had 6 receptions, 55 yards, and a touchdown. Le'Veon Bell, first game in the red, 6 carries for 39 yards. Tyler, talk to me about this offense a little bit. I know we obviously talked about the implications of the Chiefs signing Bell last week, but after seeing a game, how do you see this offense being configured moving forward?
Good to see a couple of the big guys and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Tyreek Hill score in a game where they were absolutely not needed. The Chiefs did virtually anything they wanted against the Broncos, but like me and Rob kind of debated earlier, if Le'Veon Bell would get involved, and we were both kind of wrong because Le'Veon Bell did have 6 rush attempts, which is only 2 less than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but he didn't really perform, so he was a terrible start. But I still think it's going to be a running back by committee now, and wouldn't be shocked if Le'Veon Bell is the goal line back and the kind of receiving back, because even though Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a good receiving back, Le'Veon Bell, I think, better. The Steelers would line him up as a wide receiver and have him run slants, and he would catch stuff against cornerbacks. So,
yeah, I think it goes without saying. Sorry,
no, go ahead. Go. No, you go.
I was just going to say, I think it goes without saying that Bell's one of the best pass-catching running backs we've ever seen. I feel like I repeat this every week. But I'm a Clyde owner. It seems like Clyde's still going to be the starting running back, but certainly some nervousness on the third downs and the goal line carries. So we'll see what happens. For the Broncos, Drew Lock, 254 yards, no touchdowns. Melvin Gordon had a fairly productive day, 17 carries for 68 yards and the touchdown on the ground. Beach, for this offense, obviously, injuries and just performance. You're just not happy with this team this year. Talk to me about them moving forward and, what you think you can expect out of them.
Great question. This is a Broncos team that obviously came in here 2 weeks ago and, they were able to move the ball with some consistency against the Patriots. But, Vic Fangio talked a little bit today about some of the struggles with their 3 wide receiver sets. When he said it's one of those things, sometimes you're in those groupings because of a situation, whether it's a third down or whatever. He said, I know we played more 3 wides than the other groups, but the numbers would be higher. But he said the big thing is too many negative plays when they've been in that 3 personnel set to the outside. Drew Lock coming back certainly helps. The offense, Melvin Gordon, when he's healthy and wants to run the ball consistently, has been pretty good. And obviously, Philip Lindsay has continued to kind of pick up where he left off last year as well. They're still a bit of a younger team, so I'm not all that down and out on them. I mean, they've got a couple of wins under their belt, and they have a chance to maybe pick up a couple of more. They have games against Atlanta, Vegas, Miami, and the Chargers as well. So, they're still got a chance to pick up a couple more wins and improve on that record and get better as a group.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be crucial on their top weapons performing and being healthy. So I'm sure we'll be talking about them a lot more in the next couple weeks. Next game we'll go into is the Jaguars at the Chargers. Chargers take this one at home 39-29. Justin Herbert, another fantastic showing. 347 yards and 3 touchdowns. Excuse me. And then for Gardner Minshew, 173 yards and 2 touchdowns, one each to Conley and Robinson. Tyler, talk to me about the Jaguars first. Gardner Minshew, there's been a lot of questions about his performance and possibly benching him. I think the yardage wasn't great, but 2 touchdowns this week. What do you think about his performance, and then how do you see that transpiring moving forward?
So, Gardner Minshew loves to get out to a slow start in every game that he plays. He kind of picks it up at the end, gets some garbage time, but he usually makes it a close game, and it always is in the second half. But James Robinson had a fantastic day against the Chargers.
Mega game.
22 rushes, 119 yards, 1 TD. He showed that doesn't matter how good that offense, he can be the offense if needed. So no real worries there for me. This is probably going to be one of his best games of the year, but he should be able to find the end zone throughout the rest of the season, no problem. The big concern is DJ Chark. I know a few weeks ago we had him as an ascender, and it was either an ascender or a stud, but he's definitely looking more like a dud now. I know I read a report where he kind of indirectly called out Gardner Minshew, and he's kind of waiting for that QB change, but I don't see how it would improve if they got rid of Gardner Minshew. I mean, he's a second-year guy finding his way into the NFL. There's no good free agent options. I think the offense would take a hit without Minshew. There's just no better options out there. So I think they should keep him in, but who knows what's going to happen. I don't see it getting any better for any of the wide receivers, really, if Minshew leaves. And even James Robinson, if the offense gets worse, it hurts him a little more.
Yeah, I think
nothing screams successful like Mike Glennon coming in.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think obviously the big concern, like you alluded to, we've talked about Chark and Keelan Cole a lot. They each had 1 reception this week, so just not many good things happening there. Rob, for the Chargers, obviously, like I said, Justin Herbert, another big week. Keenan Allen, 10 receptions for 125 yards. For this offense, I know, and then we've talked about the ground game a lot too. That's why I want to let you talk about it. But what do you see out of these two guys, and then the offense as a whole moving forward, coming off this big win at home?
Yeah, insane game for Justin Herbert, not only through the air, but on the ground. He had 9 carries himself for 66 yards and a touchdown. And he's not one of those quarterbacks that looks to really run first. He's running out of necessity more than anything. So clearly shows that he has the legs if needed. Of course, we talk about that. That's great for fantasy. When you get a QB that can get some legs on the ground. I mean, Kyler Murray has evolved into one of the best QBs because he has that ability to go on the ground. So Justin Herbert is an elite tier fantasy QB right now. Mm-hmm. And honestly, a good QB in just real life. I mean, they pulls the win out for the Chargers, who I wasn't sure how their season was going to go. It's still not gone well, but he's pulled it back for there. And for the run game, I'm not really sure. I think they're kind of desperately waiting for Eckler to get back because I expected Josh Kelly to get the bulk of the carries when Eckler went down, and I expected Justin Jackson to be more of the receiving back, and that's kind of how it played out. Josh Kelly, 12 carries to Justin Jackson's 5. However, Josh Kelly only could manage 29 yards on those 12 carries. Yep. So he's a rookie. I think there's plenty of time for him to get better in his career. But, yeah, no, they're not what they were looking for. And to the fact that Justin Jackson even had to run 5 times, had the 5 catches. I think they're desperately waiting for Eckler to be back, and I don't know what happens to Kelly from there. Because if he's not getting the carries and he's not really receiving, I don't really know. He had 5 catches himself, but I don't know. It's interesting to see. I'm someone who picked up Justin Jackson because I have Eckler, and I'm desperately waiting for Eckler to get back.
Yeah.
Hopefully for the playoffs. It seems like they're going to hold on him. I mean, they have no reason to rush him back. They're not fighting for a playoff spot. So it'll be interesting to see. But I'm not a huge fan of anything running except for Justin Herbert. So and then obviously Keenan Allen is just the guy. So no one else really receiving wise that I'm looking at. Even Mike Williams, I know we talked about, but had only 1 catch. So it's really the Keenan Allen show if you're going to have a receiver, and then if you have a running back, it's a hit or miss each week.
Yeah, I was going to say quick regression for Mike Williams, and then obviously Keenan Allen is almost as reliable as they come. Next game we'll talk about here is, I wish it was a game we didn't have to talk about, is the 49ers at the Patriots. Obviously, the New England Patriots take a big beating at home. Jimmy Garoppolo, 277 yards, no touchdowns, but Jeff Wilson absolutely had a day. He was actually going to be my tiebreaker stud or dud, but then he got injured, so not too sure what's going to happen with him. He had 17 carries for 112 yards and 3 touchdowns. Sad to see him have that kind of day and then get injured, especially where Jerick McKinnon was non-existent as well. So, tough start for people who started him. On the Patriots, literally not much to talk about. Cam had 98 yards and 3 interceptions. So it was just, a dreadful game to watch. Nobody looked good. Cam looked terrible. The receivers looked terrible. The defense just was not having it. Beach, you're probably one of the biggest Boston guys here. So, I mean, are you worried about the Patriots? What happens moving forward? Belichick stated that he's confident that Cam's a starter moving forward. So, what is your take on our hometown boys?
I'm gonna go back a little ways here. When the Pats signed Cam Newton over the summer, I was like, okay, great. Cam has a chance to come in here. It'll be a 1-year deal. He has something to prove. He wants to prove to a lot of people that he can still play the game. He can still play the game, at the highest level. And unfortunately, through 5 out of the first 6 games, it doesn't really seem that way. Sure, you could throw in the Seattle game in week 2. They were right there at the end. That could be a game that gets flipped and you're 3-3. They were somehow miraculously in that Kansas City game despite not having Cam Newton. Mm-hmm. So that's another game that could have gone either way. But with that said, I think it's time to start the kid. There's something going on with Cam. I don't know whether he's hurt. I don't know whether it's a mental thing going on. But he just does not seem to have whatever this Patriots staff thought he could bring to the table when they signed him back in June. With that said, a lot of people also believe that Jared Stidham doesn't have anything to bring to the table as well. But at the same time, the only couple of times that we've seen Stidham was when he's come in late in the games after poor performances by Brian Hoyer in Kansas City. And then yesterday in just a throw in the towel kind of game, here, we're going to get you in, get you some looks and see what you can do. I honestly think it's time to start the kid. Maybe you don't do it this week up in Buffalo. You give Cam one more chance. And then maybe you start him next week when you go to take on the Jets in a Monday night game and you have a little bit of extra time. You get that extra day of prep prior to the Monday night game. So I think it's time for a chance.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of concern. Cam definitely has looked off, like you said. I think...
You know how many times he's thrown to the right side of the field this year?
Enlighten me.
5. He has 5 pass attempts to the right side of the field. He's completed 2 of those. Now, that's not good. You're basically telegraphing to the defense what you're bringing to the table. It's either going to be an RPO out of the backfield, or you're going to hand off the ball, or you're looking to the left side of the field. And the other thing you got to look at too, N'Keal Harry is an absolute bust of a first round draft pick. This kid can't stay healthy. I mean, I'm not going to put yesterday on him because Cam Newton kind of let him in. He kind of let him with a suicide pass into triple coverage. And, I'll give him credit for holding on to the ball despite knowing that he was going to get rocked. But, to make matters worse, obviously the big name taken right behind N'Keal Harry in the draft, DK Metcalf, who absolutely turned on the afterburners last night in Arizona.
Yeah, that was super exciting to watch. I was going to say on the Patriots guys, though, Tyler, I'll kind of tag you in here really quick, but I know we've kind of alluded to this, but I feel like, certainly you probably drop all the Patriots wide receivers at this point, including Julian Edelman, which, pains me to say because he's always been so reliable, but I'm kind of at that point with him. I don't know if you disagree with me or what.
Yeah, I'll agree with you to the extent where you can keep him in like a 12-man PPR league and really start him. I mean, he already had played Seattle, so he's not going to play them again, but in super plus matchups, which I don't even think the Patriots have any of those, maybe against the Dolphins or the Jets, but I don't want any share of the Patriots wide receivers, and a really tough game for James White as well. I was hoping to see him get way more involved in the passing game, thought he could emerge as a PPR monster with no wide receivers performing, but he had one catch for 3 yards. So This is a grim
Scary
offense. I think there are better days ahead for this offense, but it's still pretty grim looking ahead. We might see some games for Julian Edelman where he's like 5 catches for like 50 yards, but nothing crazy.
Yeah, so unfortunately for us, it's like you said, it's not looking great, but we're always going to remain positive, and we'll see what happens moving forward.
I'm not jumping from the lighthouse yet, fellas.
No, of course not. You can never jump from the lighthouse.
Oh, no, we're winning the division.
That's right.
100%, and it starts this week when you go into Buffalo and take a crap all over New Era Field.
Yeah, we don't lose in Buffalo. Last game we'll talk about, Sunday Night Football. Great game, Seahawks at the Cardinals. Cardinals take this one in overtime, 37-34. I'll start with the Seahawks first. Russell Wilson, 388 yards. I think that says I can't read my writing. And 3 touchdowns, did have 3 interceptions. Tyler Lockett, another massive game for him, 15 receptions, 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. Hit that 200 mark this week, which was huge. Obviously, we alluded to DK Metcalf, quiet week for him, the 2 receptions for 23 yards, but did have that massive chase down to save a touchdown, which ultimately saved a touchdown. The defense held him. Chris Carson, 5 carries for 34 yards before leaving with an injury. Carlos Hyde came in and his backup did have a touchdown on the day as well. So we'll obviously monitor Carson moving forward and see if Hyde's maybe someone we want to add or take a look at him if Carson is out for the Cardinals. Kyler Murray, another massive game, 360 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also rushed 14 times for 16 yards and another touchdown. DeAndre Hopkins, 10 receptions, 103 yards, and that absolutely gorgeous touchdown in the corner of the end zone, or the front corner of the end zone. Great to see. So much offense in this game. Chase Edmonds, 7 receptions for 87 yards, also 5 for 58 rushing on the ground, and Christian Kirk, another big game, who I want to talk about as well. He had 5 receptions for 37 yards and another 2 touchdowns. So where to even start breaking this game down? Rob, I'm going to go to you for the Cardinals. Obviously, Kyler Murray had a great day. D-Hop, everybody had a great day. Kenyon Drake leaves with the injury. Chase Edmonds flashes some leather on the receiving and rushing side. So, this offense looks great. Obviously the Seahawks defense has not been great. They're one of the worst in the league. Definitely not the Legion of Boom, but this offense still clicked. So moving forward, what do you see out of them?
Yeah, it's a ton of talent on the offense. Like you said, DeAndre Hopkins, it doesn't matter that they're playing the Seahawks. DeAndre Hopkins has been good every single week. Kenyon Drake, I think, been at this point, looks like he's been holding Chase Edmonds back.
Yeah, no kidding.
So he leaves with the injury. Chase Edmonds not only gets involved, just the rushing, has 11.6 yards per carry, which is absurd. Something I don't expect him to keep up, of course. But also has 7 catches for 87 yards. I mean, that, without, if Kenyon Drake just didn't exist on that team, we're talking Chase Edmonds as an RB2 every week if he's putting up those kind of numbers. So, he didn't get a touchdown, but one touchdown there makes that an insane week for him, and it's still a good week without it. And someone Christian Kirk, someone I threw a dart at the end of the draft, as you do with wide receivers. Your last couple picks, you're just throwing darts and hoping one of them sticks with your wide receiver picks. And I picked them. I've since dropped them, but it looks like he's getting more involved the last couple weeks. So I know it was the Seahawks, and it's so hard to take away stuff. It was an overtime game, so you get a little bit more offense there. But even before overtime, I think they said one of their stats was this is like the first time in a while that they've had, or first time ever that both quarterbacks had over 300 yards passing and 50 yards rushing. So, incredible offensive day. And both of these offenses, I think, regardless of them playing each other, I think are just going to be good the rest of the year as well.
Yeah, I think, that's really good analysis on the Cardinals. I completely agree with you. For the Seahawks, obviously, Russell Wilson's been running an MVP campaign all season. DK Metcalf's kind of surprising with the quiet week, and then Tyler Lockett, obviously a massive week. And, we've come to expect that from him. He certainly has the potential for a huge game. He's a big play guy, and I think Russell Wilson certainly has the capacity. Kind of a, quiet game out of Metcalf. Don't necessarily expect that every week. I completely expect him to bounce back next week. So we'll kind of, monitor this offense moving forward. That is the last game. Obviously, Monday Night Football going on right now as we record. We just went into the third quarter. The Rams are up 10-3 over the Bears. We'll break this game down in our second episode of the week. But that will wrap up our game review portion of the show. Next and finally, we will wrap up with our waiver wire ads for the week. So we're going to do each position and also add a defensive streamer for the week. So we'll just do our top player for each position. I'll go last each time because I had a couple prepared in case I was vultured. So, Rob, you won studs and duds. We will let you go first. Who is your top running back ad for this week?
It's a tough situation we're here. Given I was looking at our league, trying to see was there anybody worth picking up. Because we're getting more information. Even as we've done this podcast, I've gotten 3 tweet notifications on Chris Carson. I know, Ben, you've probably got him as well. So we're still hearing more and more about Chris Carson and what these injuries means. Carlos Hyde's injured. So I'm just going to go with Carlos Hyde just because that Seattle Seahawks offense is just so good that, it's one of those offenses that we say start every single person that you can that's available in your league on that offense. So that Carlos Hyde being one of them if Chris Carson's a no-go. And Carlos Hyde himself is healthy because, he got hit pretty hard. He looks like he's banged up a little bit too, but they're going to have to play him. So I'm going to go with Carlos Hyde. It's not one I'm super confident in, but he's only picked up in 5% of leagues. So, he's available in 95% of leagues, which is something you're looking for at this point in the season. So, this is a guy that's going to get you 1 or 2 weeks if Chris Carson is really out. It looks like he's going to at least be out 1, maybe more. It's something with his foot, which, with a running back in their foot, seems pretty important. So I'm going to go with Carlos Hyde just because I'm iffy. The other top running back options are all also injuries. So, I'll leave those for some other people to talk about.
Yeah, I think it's obvious. You have a RB1 that produces the way that Chris Carson has. You're going to grab his backup, especially given the offense that he's in. Beach, I'll go to you next. Who's going to be your number 1 running back ad this week?
Rob stole mine. I'm going Carlos Hyde as well.
That's fine. Just provide some color.
Coming off the 2019 season, he had 1,000 rushing yards with Houston. Obviously, we know Chris Carson, he left the game last night with an ankle injury. And Rob's already mentioned a couple updates so far through the night here today. Hyde came in last night, took over and carried 15 times for 68 yards. Added a score with 3 catches out of backfield. And I think he has a chance to kind of carry that over next week against a San Fran team that, again, it's one of those coin flip what San Fran defense are going to get. We saw them get lit up early on in the year. Obviously, they've lost a couple of key guys in Joey Bosa and a couple others, but it's certainly got to keep an eye on.
I think you meant Nick Bosa, but we
All right, Nick Bosa, sorry.
Sorry, we got the point there.
All
Tyler,
the Bosas.
yeah, True. Tyler, who's going to be your running back ad for the week?
I don't want to be a complete Looney Tune and say Damian Harris again because I think better days
You know what?
are
You do
ahead.
you play your game.
I'll go with Tevin Coleman. He's owned in 20% of leagues right now, and I think he could be an absolute steal with his value right now. They're already talking about him possibly coming back this week, and with Jeff Wilson going on the IR as well, that makes him and Raheem Mostert on the IR. So if Tevin Coleman comes back, he's 100% going to be the early down back guy. I think he'll mainly be competing with Jerick McKinnon. I'm trying to think of the other San Fran running back.
Hursty. It's Hursty. I just don't know his first name. It's something crazy.
Yep. They could use him this week, but I think long term, Tevin Coleman's definitely the guy, and he could become like a season long starter if he does come back this week. He plays Seattle, so that could be a great matchup if you're desperate for running backs with all these injuries and you don't get the guys that you want to fill, like Carlos Hyde and Giovanni Bernard if you don't have them. But season long, I think Tevin Coleman has a lot of potential, so I'm going after him in the waivers.
That's fair. I also had Carlos Hyde, but for obvious reasons that we've already stated, my guy is going to be Jerick McKinnon. Actually, Tyler, I'm going to counter you. Obviously, with Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert being out, McKinnon, for me at least, is the next guy in line. Tevin Coleman's been out, sure to return soon, but, despite Jerick McKinnon having an absolutely terrible week this week, he's shown promise other weeks. So, go ahead and add either of them. For me, it's going to be McKinnon. If you want to have Tevin Coleman, that's fine as well. We'll jump to wide receivers next. Tyler, I'll let you go first because you went last. Who's going to be your wide receiver ad for the week?
All right, and I'll go with one of our studs and duds contestant, Nelson Aguilar. I'll go over him briefly. He's 2% owned. He's a fantastic ad. He's slowly emerging as the number one guy over Renfro and Ruggs. He has way better hands than he used to. He had one bad drop while I was watching the game that still made me laugh. But I think this Raiders offense is going to be pretty good through the rest of the season. Jacobs has struggled a little bit, so they've leaned more on the passing game, and he's probably going to be the second target for Derek Carr.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, especially after the performances he's had over the past couple of weeks. Beach, we'll go back to you. Who's going to be your wide receiver ad for the week?
I'm going to Cleveland. Rashard Higgins. No more OBJ in the lineup for the Browns means all the guys are going to have to step up and fill the void. Higgins did so yesterday. Caught all 6 passes thrown his way. 110 yards in a win over the Bengals. It could become a pretty consistent target for Mayfield and the rest of the Browns offense, especially this week against the Raiders team that just gave up 45 points to Tom Brady in Tampa Bay. And they've also given up 290 passing yards per game so far this season.
All right, that's fair. I think we all agree with you as well. Rob, we'll go to you for your number one wide receiver ad this week.
A guy I've talked about a couple times on the podcast, but he's been kind of inconsistent here and there, but it's Brandon Ayuk for the 49ers. His name is fun to say. But no, he's a guy that one of the rookies that we talked about coming out that could have been hit or miss. He went to a smaller school in consideration of some of the other wide receivers that came out of this draft. And he's looked very good. Had an insane week this week. And then Deebo Samuel cannot stay healthy to save his life. Comes back, does well, plays, and then gets injured again. So, with Deebo Samuel out, the 49ers offense still looks good. This week is a 49ers pickup week, mostly because, again, it's another week that everybody on the 49ers is injured again. So it's tough for them, but even with all these injuries, their coach is a good offensive coach, so there's just a lot of value in that offense. And so as players get injured, you're kind of filling them with the next man up mentality sort of thing. So, you guys talked about the running back situation there with Tevin Coleman and Jerick McKinnon being the next man up. I'm saying Brandon Ayuk will be more consistent now that Deebo Samuel's out again with an injury. So I'm going to have to go with Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, that's a really good pick there. I think he's primed for a big role now moving forward. We've kind of seen flashes of him this year, so I definitely agree with you there. My guy, I know we kind of talked about him last week. He's still technically under 50% owned, so he qualifies, is going to be Christian Kirk. I don't get how he's still not owned in over 50% of leagues with the way the offense is playing, with the way Kyler's playing. He has 4 touchdowns over the last 2 games that he's played, so obviously, he's ready to rock and roll this year. I don't need to say much more, but my guy's going to be Christian Kirk. Rob, I'm going to turn right back around to you for your tight end ad of the week.
You know who it's going to be. It is going to be the guy you didn't know his name, and that is Harrison Bryant. So I liked Austin Hooper, and I think I had him either as an ascender or a pickup, like a week or 2 ago, and he had a good week. And even with Njoku back, they use a lot of 2 tight end sets there in Cleveland. With OBJ gone, they're going to need to use more tight end sets because they don't have the wide receivers. Beach gave a good example of Rashard Higgins stepping up this week, and I could see him stepping up more, but, you still need that role of a lot of pass catchers, especially with someone like Baker Mayfield who struggles sometimes. So they're going to be throwing as many pass catchers out there, and Harrison Bryant's owned in 0.7% of leagues, so most likely, if you have a league, he's available in it. One of the better values waiver pickups. But Austin Hooper, I said I wasn't sure on his injury because it was a freak injury that kind of happened before the game. It was kind of surprising he wasn't on the list all week as like a potential injury. It's because he had appendicitis, so he's got the surgery. It looks like that's going well, but that kind of surgery, tire people out, stuff like that. Especially in a game of football, you get your appendix out. You don't want to go get spear tackled a week later. So he could miss some time. So if he misses some time, Harrison Bryant I think is a must pick up because the way Cleveland uses their tight ends and how Austin Hooper was playing before.
Yeah, that's a fair bet. Beach, you'll be up next. Who's your tight end ad of the week?
Again, Rob Poachbine, Harrison Bryant again. 4 for 5 yesterday. 56 yards, 2 TDs on the season so far. He's brought in 12 of the 18 balls thrown his way. The 4th round pick out of Lane Kiffin's system last year at FAU. He's got a chance to improve on those numbers. Obviously, David Njoku there as well. And Rob already mentioned Austin Hooper down following the appendicitis. And no more OBJ again, as I already mentioned with Rashard Higgins. Baker's going to need to find other guys to start throwing the ball to, and I think Harrison Bryant could be great, especially where, once again, they use a lot of double tight end sets in Cleveland.
Yeah, I think, good echo and good analysis. Tyler, we'll go to you for your tight end ad of the week.
For the tight ends, I'm all over the Philadelphia Eagles tight ends. Right now, you got Richard Rodgers as a potential streamer against the Dallas Cowboys, and he performed pretty well last week. He had 6 catches for 85 yards, which that's tight end 1 territory there, and the Cowboys defense is Swiss cheese. He could absolutely light it up. But if you don't go after him, you can go after Dallas Goedert as well, who he's expected back week 10. And we've already seen an absolute boom game out of him this year. 8 catches, 101 for yards, and then a touchdown as well. And that was with Ertz in the lineup. Ertz is out indefinitely. I can't remember the exact injury that he has, but it's not looking like he's going to be back immediately. So I think when Goddard comes back week 10, he's going to be the starter there. So Eagles are pretty fluent offense now, so I'm looking forward to both those guys. Normally I would pick up Richard Rodgers just this week, but in all my leagues I own like Travis Kelce or Darren Waller, so I'm all set on tight ends. But Rodgers I think he's gonna boom against the Cowboys.
Okay, that's fair. We'll monitor that moving forward. My guy, not been mentioned yet, is going to be Logan Thomas from the football team. He's only 8.5% rostered. He scored a touchdown the last 2 weeks. Obviously, with the volatility on this offense, obviously Terry McLaurin's a clear-cut number 1 receiver, but I think Kyle Allen is, slinging the rock well enough to support Logan Thomas as well, to have that big target who's dependable. So he's going to be my guy this week. We'll go through real quick. Tyler, we'll start with you for a defensive special team streamer this week, and just a quick explanation as to why.
I had a lot of trouble finding a defense that I liked that was under 50% owned, but I'm going to go with the Raiders versus the Cleveland Browns. The Raiders are only 2% owned right now. With the injury to OBJ, it's going to be tough sledding for Baker Mayfield, and I know he's coming off a big game, but that was against the Bengals, who are also very bad. And the Raiders have played some really good teams this far. They've already played the Chiefs, and then they played the Bucks, and they just got roasted by those teams. So I think they've underperformed so far. They're not a good defense, but Baker Mayfield is a turnover machine. If they can sell out to stop the run against those Cleveland backs, I think they can have a great fantasy day and with some picks and sacks against Baker Mayfield. So they're my guys this week.
All right, Beach, we'll go back to you for your defensive streamer for the week.
I'm going to go with the Tennessee Titans. They're going to be taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a team or a defense, that's rostered in 13% of leagues, despite giving up a bunch of points yesterday. I'm still confident in their ability to kind of bounce back, especially against a Bengals team that at times this year has been as inconsistent as they come. So I'm going with Tennessee in a bounce back performance against a rookie quarterback.
All right, and then Rob, that'll leave you for your defensive streamer of the week.
Trying to be different here, and also trying to pick, like Tyler said, a defense that is not around the 50% owned. So I'm trying to get creative here. I'm going to go with the Lions. I mean, they're playing the Colts, which is not a great offense. And honestly, the Lions, one of the worst defenses so far in fantasy up to this point. But just came off the Falcons, who, give or take what the Falcons can do, honestly, losing the game. I mean, they're still an incredible offense. And to hold them to the points, I think it was 22 points that they did, or 21 points. So, it's not an incredible option, but we're talking about defensive streamers against a Colts team that doesn't score too many points. Hold Atlanta coming off a good week here, 1-2 turnovers, and all of a sudden they're a very streamable option, and they're only owned in 2% of leagues, so you should be able to get them in any leagues. Obviously we have those. It's usually who's ever playing the Jets or the Giants, and unfortunately this week two good defenses are playing the Jets and the Giants, so most likely they'll already have been snagged in your leagues.
Yeah. I was going to say, obviously, my pick's going to be the Chargers. They're fairly under the 50%. They're at like 37% owned. They're playing Denver this week, who just got shredded by the Chiefs defense last week. 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. Great day for the Chiefs defense. Obviously, they take on the Jets this week, so I'll probably be keeping them in my lineup. But for the Chargers facing Denver, I wouldn't expect the same production that the Chiefs defense put out, but I think it could be a good day for the Chargers defense as well. So I will stream them this week if I am in that position. And that will wrap up our waiver wire ads for this week, and that will also wrap up our show. We want to thank you all so much for being here. We want to thank Beach very much for being here as well from Titletown Takes. Beach, tell them where they could find you.
Yeah, you guys can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker. You can find us on YouTube, on Twitter as well at Titletown_Takes. You can follow my personal Twitter handle at Ian Bow as well. Just dropped a new episode this past week, and potentially got a big guest in the pipeline joining us in the next week or so as well. So stay tuned and keep an eye out for that.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely be sure to check him out in Beach again on behalf of the three of us. Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate you taking the time. Again, if you're new to the channel, make sure to give us a like and a follow. Rob will have all those links below. And until next time, I will see you on the next episode of the Fantasy Frenzy Podcast.
See ya.
Peace out, fellas.